Hey guys, you know we're fans of the In Search of Darkness documentary series, and now is your chance to order the upcoming film In Search of Darkness 1990 to 94. We have a link in the description of this episode. Check it out and order part 1 of the definitive 90s horror documentary today.
From the banks of Dewey Lake, it's the Dewey Pod Monster. Horror Week 2023.
Welcome back. My name is Sean, and this is the Dewey Pod Monster Podcast. This is your weekly podcast about consumption and other shit. With me this week is the host of the Dewey Pod Monster Podcast. His name is Sean. Sean, how are you doing today?
Nice shoes. Wanna fuck?
All right. Let's just stop right now. It's not going to get any better than that.
You might be right.
Episode.
You might be right.
It'll be a 13-second podcast. I love it. So anyway, what have you been watching this week outside of some, I don't know, job tips, I guess?
On the job training videos?
Yeah, that's it.
You know, really just been doing the regular thing, the regular shows. Special Forces started again, season 2. I think we're like 2 episodes into that by the time this will go up.
I don't remember that one. What's
God
that?
Damn it. It's the one about the people, the B-list and Z-list celebrities. They're doing like Special Forces training.
Oh, okay. Yeah. I remember.
The real highlights have been Tara Reid is on the show, and she looks like, I mean, maybe it's appropriate for the topic. And I don't mean to be an asshole or bully anybody about their appearance and all that stuff. She looks like a fucking ghoul, dude. She looks awful, like by any standards.
I haven't seen her in a couple years. I think Sharknado might have been the last thing that I really remember seeing her in, which is probably a decade ago at this point. But not to sound incredibly shallow or shitty, but it's a far cry from the Bunny Lebowski of past. For sure.
I was looking at Big Lebowski because, funny you bring that up, I was going to show it to my kids, like 13 and 12, and I don't know if they're quite ready for Big Lebowski, but my daughter likes mystery movies, and that's kind of like a noir mystery spin on a...
Doesn't that movie have like a higher F-bomb count than like any other live action movie, at least at its time?
Oh, I don't know about that, but they live with me. They're used to it.
Well, that's true.
But I looked and I was like, oh yeah, Tara Reid's in this movie. Wow. How times have changed. So it's some of the highlights, some of the celebrities are like Tara Reid, Des Bryant is on the show, Brian Austin Green, Black China, who's a current day influencer, if you're not familiar with Black China. And
I'm not.
Yeah, it's basically what you would expect. They're putting them through the paces. It is fairly entertaining. There's Bodie Miller, who's an Olympian. There's a few Olympians, former Olympians, a couple athletes. Robert Ory's in it, but the first episode, they don't even talk to Robert Ory or show him, besides for maybe a second. They do these little testimonials where they'll talk to these people before they come on the show, or before they do the training, I guess. And they'll kind of keep tossing back to this interview to hear what they had to say. So it's whatever. It's just a show to watch. So been watching that. I really fell down the rabbit hole. I talked about it on the Tremors episode, I think, about 42nd Street Pete on YouTube. I've fallen hardcore down the rabbit hole. And the guy was like, he sold...
Hey, for those who aren't part of this 2-person conversation, I'm getting 42nd Pete videos sent to me at 8 a.m. So that's how far down the rabbit hole.
Oh my God.
Going.
I'm watching it all the time, man. The guy is super interesting. He lives in Ohio now, but he used to live in New York City, and he sold VHS tapes and film, like 8mm film, 16mm film of like loops, like stag films and porno and schlocky B-movie shit. And he talks about it, and they talk about, he worked for, I think the company was called New York Liquidators, and they would basically sell anything they could sell, but movies were a big thing. And he talks about bootlegs. They did DVD releases with 42nd Street Pete, 42nd Street Pete Presents, and all these things. He writes zines, and he's written a couple books that you can buy. And there are these rants about like how you can't buy them from Amazon. You have to buy them from him directly now because he's been stiffed on these payments and all this stuff. It's just really interesting. But he's been interviewed on other YouTube channels about 42nd Street back in the day. And that kind of put me down another bit of a rabbit hole. You grew up in Livonia, right?
Yeah.
Are you familiar with the Melody Theater in Inkster?
Vaguely.
So the Melody Theater was in Inkster on Michigan Avenue. And it was like, it started off, I think, as want to say it was like a banquet hall or like a venue, like a wedding venue or whatever. And it turned into a theater, which soon became an adult theater. For the longest time, it was an adult theater. And it got torn down, I want to say, in like 2000, like late 90s, 2000s. And there was a website that I found that had reviews of the Melody Theater. And one was this guy who was like a police officer who was involved in raids, and they talked about how the theater was just people engaged in various sex acts, like just out in the open, and how depraved it was. And I think it was like a Christian kind of monitor website.
I remember this. I just looked it up for a reference point. I remember this theater.
I remember just
sadly
thinking how skeevy it always was driving by it as a kid. Obviously never went there or anything, but
it looks like Harpo's, but a porno theater.
Pretty much. And I don't know, 42nd Street Pete put me down that rabbit hole. So I was, he talks about live sex shows in New York and peep shows and, the loops and stuff. So it's a really interesting channel if you're into like the history of all that kind of seedy Times Square underground shit. And other than that, I talked about it. I don't know when in the timeline I would have talked about this, but I talked about the leaf razor. I was shaving my head. I think that episode came out, by the time you hear this.
I think it was on the Pumpkinhead episode.
Okay, so I've just talked about it, probably.
Yeah.
Who knows when I really talked about it.
4 weeks ago.
So I talked about it initially. We record out of sequence, obviously, and I talked about a month ago. I just changed the blades on it. You literally take these little razors and you change them out. So it lasted me about a month. And thumbs up, man. No affiliate, not getting any money out of this, but leaf razor, the 3-blade leaf razor, it's the shit. It's a little expensive, a little on the pricey side, but as a guy who shaves his head every other day, it's been pretty good.
I mean, the best things in life are not free. It's good to hear.
For the most part, that's absolutely 90% true.
Anything else that you've caught up on over the past week or so?
Nothing I can think about.
So I watched some crap. I went into catching up. No, I wouldn't even say catching up. Like, only one of these movies have I really been wanting to see. First, I put on the film Street Trash, which is what year was that? Oh, you're laughing because we already brought up the movie Street Trash separately. For those who are not familiar with it, Street Trash is absolutely the kind of stupid movie that we would watch. It's a film from 1987, which involves some bums that get sold a mysterious liquor from a liquor store where you tend to get liquor. And essentially it just mutilates the fuck out of them. And there's bum wars and culture is probably the wrong word. It's a fucking trash pile of a movie, but it's entertaining for what it is. There's a lot of neon colors and stuff that come out of people. So it's got all the wonderful, horrible things that you might like if you listen to this show ever. You mentioned that you hadn't seen this, but you were looking to see it.
It's been on my radar for a long time.
I can't imagine why you wouldn't have maneuvered your way over to it.
No, I haven't built up the muster to watch it.
Is that what it is?
Maybe. I don't know.
I might have been either just intoxicated enough to put it on or just intoxicated enough to not turn it off. I'm not really sure which one it was, but it made for an interesting evening. Followed that up with a movie from, I believe it was from 2020 called Butt Boy.
I will never not laugh at that title.
I just discovered this movie last week and basically found it and watched it all within a 24-hour period. Are you familiar with this movie at all?
Not other than what you've told me about it.
Okay. So, without ruining this movie, and this is a movie that if for some reason you want to hear us talk about this extensively, just let us know because it's apt. We do listen to requests when we get them. But the premise of this movie is basically this guy discovers from going to the proctologist that he really enjoys things going up his butt. And throughout the movie, he continues to shove stuff up his ass until it creates kind of like a vortex where there are things living in his ass. And by things, I mean a dog and children, and they're not just living, they're growing. And he also shoves a full-grown policeman up his ass at one point. If that doesn't sell you on the movie, which it absolutely should, because who doesn't want to watch an hour and a half of a guy just shoving stuff up his ass? I won't say how this movie ends, but the ending of this movie absolutely justifies its existence. It's one of the better endings to a movie that I've seen, which sounds really, really ridiculous in a movie called Butt Boy about a guy shoving stuff up his butt. But it's so out of left field the way that they choose to end this movie that it will leave you laughing just because it's so insane. That movie is available on Tubi, so maybe I'll make a video about saying go watch Butt Boy, but it's worth hunting down.
It sounds like the perfect double feature to match up with the nostril picker for some reason.
I haven't seen the nostril picker yet, but I mean, it's probably equally gross. Nostril picker looks a little more classy.
I mean, that's definitely got to be a future episode. I need to watch the nostril picker and talk
sure.
about it, because it just looks skeezy enough to be something that we would want to talk about.
Well, we've teased it enough times on this show now that we kind of have to, right?
Works for me.
Let's see. So I also went and caught the movie Willy's Wonderland, which I know you had mentioned seeing this before, which is kind of a weird choice to have Nick Cage star in your movie and choose to make him a silent character. It really worked for me, though. I mean, it's just weird and creepy and kind of like tripped out enough that I found it to be a pretty entertaining movie. There's not a ton of story that's really in there, but it gives you just enough to kind of take you on a weird ride for about an hour and a half and essentially watch Nick Cage murder the shit out of Chuck E. Cheese animatronics for a little while. I don't know. I found it to be pretty entertaining. Did you say you'd seen it, or just that you had kind of known about it?
No, I've seen it. This could be like a side episode in this episode if we get into Willy's Wonderland, because contrary to your opinion, I didn't enjoy it much.
No?
It was better than what was that? There was another Nicolas Cage movie that I watched right around the same time. Prisoners of the Ghostland. I don't know if you saw that.
No, I haven't seen that.
I saw that, and I saw Willy's Wonderland, right? And those are the two movies that he made right before Pig and Unbearable Weight of Massive Talent. And I watched that, and Willy's Wonderland, it's kind of like a riff on Five Nights at Freddy's a little bit. Like he gets locked in this, like a Chuck E. Cheese,
like
a haunted Chuck E. Cheese or something, basically, or I don't know, pedophiles or something ran the place, and they inhibit the animatronic robots that still live there. And I don't know, something about it. There's no story, and I don't know what, I'd have to torture myself and watch it again, but I just remember not really enjoying it. And I think probably for the reasons that you said, like they have Nick Cage in it. He doesn't, does he say anything in it? I mean, you've seen it more recently than I have.
He's got a couple grunts and like reaction noises, but not like, it's not like a communication thing. He'll be like, if he like, brains a giant animatronic monkey with a plunger, he'll be like, "Ugh," and that's about it. There's no real,
but no actual script.
Yeah, it's not, even the grunts that he has, he's not communicating something other than like, I'm struggling at the moment. Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
or victory. But yeah, I think it was, I think what you said about it, like he doesn't have any lines. He drinks, they keep having this throwback to this drink that they don't ever explain, that he just has a case of this, like, I don't know.
It's a energy drink of some kind. So
Jolt style energy drink that he keeps going back to. And I don't know, just didn't really find much of a point to it. Not that a movie has to have a point. I mean, God knows we've talked about enough shit that has no point to it at all. Just something about it. I just can't put my finger on it right now without going back and actually watching it, or I don't know. I don't think I took notes on it at that time. But there's something about it just didn't really strike me.
If I remember right, they did say the animatronics were aliens at the beginning of the movie. That's why they kind of get weird and murder people. But like I said, I liked it for what it was, just because it was, I guess this is one of those we'll just disagree on. I like that I didn't have to overthink on it, and that's fine. So you can be wrong once in a while.
I can be. That's fine. I think we've already established that I'm sometimes can be more of the, you like to watch entertainment, kind of like turn off and just have something on and veg out and watch it. And I don't know, sometimes I like to have a little bit more than that. I do like that too, but I don't know. Maybe I pick and choose which one I prefer whenever it tickles my fancy.
Well, the only other thing I went back and watched this week, and you won't get to hear in depth on this till next Halloween, but I watched Halloween 3 this weekend because, I don't know, just kind of haven't watched it in a while, and God, that's a good fucking movie to go back to. Like, it really holds up so much. Frankly, it holds up so much better than all the Halloween movies outside of 1978. And I could, depending on the day, could make a real strong argument that I might like it more than 1970.
Wow. All right.
That's it, though. Anything else you want to touch on before we kind of shift gears here?
Nope. Have not had a chance to watch really much of anything besides some vegetation style shit.
I just told you I watched Willy's Wonderland. That's vegetation style shit.
Oh yeah, I know, but that's
different shit.
Yeah.
Less vegetal. All right. So we're going to take a quick break here, and then we'll be back, and we're going to talk about our topic for the week, which is the film Frankenhooker. We have recently started doing some live watch parties. We were at Dog and Pony Show, and we had a blast watching the movie The Stuff. And now, coming up on Halloween, we're going to be doing a double feature there where we're going to be hanging out and watching some spooky movies while you either have some beer or eat some candy or whatever you want to do. But we would really dig it if you came out and hung out with us. So if you're interested in coming out to hang out with us on Halloween, you can follow Dog and Pony Show Brewing at Dog and Pony Show Brewing on Instagram, or check out their website at dogandponyshowbrewing.com. Of course, we'll also be posting about the event as it gets a little bit closer, and we'll let you know about what movies we decide to watch at that point. Hint, hint, one of them might look a little bit like this Wayne Campbell guy, but he's a little more shapely than that. All right, so this week we are talking about the movie Frankenhooker, which was released in the year 1990. This movie currently sits at 6.2 out of 10 on IMDb and is number 3,175, up 1,471 spots from wherever. We start these with a third-party review, and this week we are back to doing that because there are reviews on this movie. Danielle K gives this movie 1 star out of 5, and her review's pretty in-depth. It says, Paul Rudd was not in this movie.
It's very true. Spot on review. I gotta agree, 100%. Paul Rudd was not in this movie.
I know, it's one of the few things that's disappointing about this film, I guess. Sean, you said this is the first time that you've caught this movie?
It is. This is the first time that I've actually seen this, but let's go to the IMDb storyline before we really start to get into it.
Oh, okay.
We don't want to forget about that. So sometimes we read the plot, sometimes we read the storyline. Today, we're going to go at silent third member Ed Sutton, who provides us this storyline. You can find him at esutton@mindspring.com. He says, a medical school dropout loses his fiancée in a tragic lawnmower accident and decides to bring her back. Unfortunately, he was only able to save her head, so he goes to the red light district in the city and lures prostitutes into a hotel room so he can get parts for his girlfriend.
Yeah, it's about half right.
It covers about half of the movie.
Well, yeah. It's a simple movie. So let me kind of start with this. Did you have any expectations going into this movie? Because this movie has always been like, I think this is one of the movies where when people say cult classic movie, I always say this is that's a hard thing to really say what's a cult classic movie. I think this is a definitive cult classic movie because there is definitely a large vocal minority of people that really love this movie, for better or worse.
A large vocal minority.
Yeah, they're like Republicans, but less anal or more anal, I guess, depending on the prostitute. So what, if any, expectations or thoughts did you have on this going into it?
So just to lead it off, I remember seeing the cover of this in the video store countless times because 1990 would have been, when this came out, would have been prime time to see something like this, see a cover of this. I've seen several variations. I've seen the ones that have the light on it that lights up, the street light. I've seen the ones that say, want a date or whatever the taglines were that are on the box. So I've seen that several times. I think when we talked about watching this, I asked you, I said, is this a musical? Like, is this a musical comedy or something? Because I just never had seen it. And it just for some reason struck me as being a musical I don't know why I thought it was a musical. I don't think there's any musical interlude in this movie. But I just, like you said, cult classic. I had heard people talk about it before. I've heard you talk about it before, but I just never caught it. It just was one of those things that I had always seen at the video store. And for whatever reason, the cover just maybe turned me off or something. I don't know. Maybe I thought it wasn't up to the standard that I wanted to see. I don't know. I have no idea why I never saw this movie. I just never saw it. It was just, I saw it several times at the video store. I just never saw it. I think there was even a case or a cover that had a button you pressed and it talked.
I'm not familiar with that one. This movie probably has as many re-releases as, The Evil Dead or any of those mid 80s to early 90s movies that I'm sure they sold the rights to it to whoever would distribute it, put a new coat of paint on it, and just respooled the same video cassette over and over again to resell. Early on, what's your immediate impression of this? I don't want to play my hand quite yet, but as a first-time viewer, what was your immediate impression or thoughts with this movie?
It kind of starts off weird because we start off at this party. I mean, for good reason when I get into it. They start at this party. It's a birthday party for her father, the girl. So basically, there's a few characters that are going on.
There's a birthday party. It's not important who the party's for.
So Jeffrey, the two main characters really that we get to know are Jeffrey and Elizabeth. And Jeffrey is he works for the power company or something. And Elizabeth is kind of a little bit, I guess she's supposed to be on the heavy side. her clothes are kind of stuffed to make her look bigger than she is. But watching this, I can't quite put my finger on what movie this reminded me of, but it almost had like a Pee-wee's Big Adventure, or some kind of, had like this kind of 50s, 60s style throwback, like some of the music. We start with Jeffrey. He's trying to build this, he's trying to talk to this brain with an eyeball in it. I don't know. It was a weird start to a movie.
It's kind of got, at least to start with, a color palette and vibe of like a Beetlejuice or that era Tim Burton.
Yeah.
It's very vibrant. And I think aside from when they're actually going to, flop houses and stuff where there's, just the most amount of hookers you've ever seen wandering around anywhere, aside from when they're doing something like that, this is a very, very colorful movie as far as like there's a lot of purple tones, a lot of neon blues and pinks and stuff like that. That's really prevalent from start to finish through this whole fiasco.
Like I said, it had that kind of, like I think you perfectly just summed it up. It had a very Tim Burton look to it for whatever reason. I didn't think of it at the time, and I had to come up with kind of Pee Wee Herman off the top of my head, because that's just kind of, Pee-wee's Big Adventure. That's just what it felt like to me, but that's totally, Tim Burton. Now that you say that, it totally has a Tim Burton feel to it.
So for me, when I first saw this, I saw this on video cassette many, many, many years ago. This is probably one of the earlier, I guess, cult classics or B movies. I'm sure I thought this was like the most obscure movie whenever I found it, because I remember buying it at a resale shop. Like I remember finding it at a new and used record and like video store. One of those stores that there's still a few of them around, not nearly as many, but one of those stores that has just like a whole plethora of movies, CDs, all that. It's like a garage sale, but in store form, and all they have is media. I came across this and it was like $15, and I was like, wait, so it's Frankenstein and a hooker? And my 15-year-old brain was like, what could possibly go wrong with this? And I can't say I was disappointed. Like, it had pretty much everything I kind of wanted at that point. This is very much so a colorful, schlocky, just oozes early 90s feeling movie. This came out in 1990. But this very much so feels like there is a definite, in my opinion, a difference in a movie that feels like it's from any part of the 80s and when the 90s kind of came along. There's some movies in the late 80s that feel this way too, that they just have a whole different vibe to them than that like eerie kind of like, there's something about like 80s cult movies like this or underground movies like this that almost make you feel like dirty, like you need a shower or something like that. This might make you feel that way, but it's more goofy than it is like terrifying. Like even the scenes that are quote unquote horrific in this, for like better terminology, because they're really, really put behind a veil of comedy to try and like, I don't know if it's to soften the blow on it or just a directorial choice, but it works for me. It's entertaining and 90s schlock to a T.
This is what I wrote in my note. This is word for word, verbatim what I wrote. It feels like a time capsule movie, something that could only be made in the late 80s, early 90s. I feel like, piggybacking off what you said, to me it has a feel of something that it kind of sits in the cut, right, between movies, an 80s kind of B movie and a 90s B movie. It has like, you just can't really put your finger on what exactly it is. Like you said, it's got a little bit of a grime to it, but it also, you can tell it's a low budget movie, but the effects are actually pretty well done. There's a few things that are really like, I laughed at a scene later on with all the hookers in the hotel room when they start to do we'll probably get to
super
it.
Crack?
Yeah, when they get to the super crack and they all start having reactions to the super crack. But you kind of mentioned directorial choice. This is directed by Frank Henenlotter. And the movie, I don't know if you've ever seen the movie that he did before this called Brain Damage, but...
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so this has a really very similar feel to Brain Damage. You can tell it's got the same directorial vision, I guess. But yeah, that one's a kind of a weird, similar kind of thing going with it. And it feels like it's in the lineage. Like I had seen Brain Damage before, and when I looked up Frankenhooker on IMDb and saw that Frank Henenlotter had done it, and I saw that he had done Brain Damage, I was like, oh, yeah, no, that totally makes sense. It has a lot of those same kind of sensibilities. And I like we have to talk a little bit about the characters. So the main character is Jeffrey. He, like we said, he worked for the power company or whatever, but he was like a medical student, or he was trying to become a doctor, and he decided, I don't know.
It's like a self-taught medical student.
We talked about it in the storyline when we set it up. He's like an inventor, tinkerer kind of guy.
He's like Tim the Toolman Taylor, but aspiring to be a mad scientist.
Definitely mad scientist. He puts together this automatic lawnmower for his fiance's dad for his birthday, and she's standing in front of it and starts it up, and it runs her over and it chops her up, and there's like a news report about it. But after that, he's trying to kind of scheme to bring her back to life and how he can do it. And there's this like schematic, full body schematic on the table where he's drawing these notes and he's mumbling different formulas and calculations and whatnot. And just that whole kind of feel to it. I just like the art direction of the movie besides just the film direction. I really enjoyed seeing all that stuff. It's, again, super low budget, but just, it feels...
it's effective.
It feels authentic. Like, it feels like they did as much as they could to make this feel bigger than it actually is.
Well, it's effective, too. If you're trying to lay the blueprint of this guy is whether he's nuts or he knows what he's doing or, you know, wherever you want to fall in that pendulum between those two extremes, it's laying enough groundwork to say, okay, this guy might have built a lawnmower that destroyed his fiancée, but he seems to think he can put her back together. And that's kind of how we're going to ramp up this story to, you know, hookers and body parts being turned into a Frankenstein bride. I don't know. You're right. I can't really say that it's authentic because the whole premise of this movie is so like batshit crazy that authentic is probably not the word I would use, but I get where you're going with that.
It's just, I feel like it's a real love letter to 80s style. And it's weird to say that about a movie that's from 1990 that was probably filmed in 89, but it almost, watching it this far removed, it really feels like a love letter to 80s style B movies, as how everything goes along with it. Like the story, how crazy the story is, how out there it is for what it is. And like I said, on top, the art direction and the film direction of the movie itself, to me, just feels like a total throwback to a year before, a year or two. I guess 84 through 87 style movie. This is like a real, just in my mind, feels like a bit of a love letter to that time frame. And I talked about Brain Damage. That's only a few years earlier than this, so it's almost like a throwback to that. It's weird.
I forgot that Henenlotter also directed the Basket Case movies. Some more Fred under his belt for those of us who like strange, fucked up movies about weird prosthetic doing shit.
It kind of, you bring that up. It's funny. I didn't really put two and two together, but there's a scene near the end of the movie where all these little creations come to life and they start crawling out and like heads with just legs sprouting off of them and stuff. It totally has that Basket Case feel to those little monsters too.
Oh, I'm sure some of those were extras or reused from
throwaways.
Yeah, it has to be, right?
You would think so, yeah.
So this movie does kind of ratchet up kind of quickly. This is about an hour and a half runtime, but it doesn't really feel like that. There's not that much story in here that we're trying to connect, like we mentioned. So we get a pretty quick rundown of lawnmower, body getting destroyed, and then basically in what feels like 20 minutes, what's his name? Within 20 minutes, Jeffrey is kind of patrolling around Brooklyn, or New York. It's probably not Brooklyn. I don't remember what part of New York it is.
Two Midwestern guys talking about New York, geography,
wherever it is. Yeah, close enough. He's in New York. He's from New Jersey. I know that, and he's trying to find the quote unquote perfect woman or perfect proportions. I think his initial plan is supposed to be like he's just going to get this person who's like a 1-for-1 match of what he wants for his fiance, and then he quickly realizes that it's not going to work. So he goes back home, supercharges crack because he sees that these hookers will do anything for crack, and makes super crack, which we get a little bit of a taste of at his garage dwelling, but when it's like rock candy from hell.
Yeah, huge rocks, crystals.
Right. So basically he goes back to this, again, it's like a flop house essentially, and he's got to get 8 or 9 like different hookers up in this room, something like that, and he's taking all their measurements and trying to like figure out the logistics of how this is going to work, which if you take one look at these women, you're like, these women are all different shapes and sizes. I don't know how you're going to make one cohesive like person out of this, but whatever. I also don't understand what his plan was, because the way it plays is the hookers find the super crack, they go ape shit, and they use the super crack, they explode, and he acts like he didn't expect this outcome. Like, how are you going to get pieces of them home to make this happen? If the super crack epidemic didn't happen, like, what was your plan to see this through?
The explosions were really pretty cool because they're like casts of these actresses and they're frozen in time and then exploded. But I have to say, lesson learned from this movie, 90s hookers in New York City were just all in really great shape. And you kind of buried it, but he meets up with a pimp / drug dealer named Zorro. Yeah. Zorro is a great character. This is where Jeffrey learns from Zorro basically that the hookers will do anything for crack, and they lead him. The one hooker.
They should have gave him a line about his Zubas just because he's always wearing Zubas in this fucking movie.
He had a great wardrobe. I want to pattern my life. Well, not my life, but my fashion choices after Zorro. But he basically shows Jeffrey like, hey, with some money, I can get you a bunch of girls and, you can get all high or whatever. And he gives him half an hour in this hotel room. And that's, the explosions happen. Jeffrey didn't think this out very well. And he's taken all these parts back to New Jersey so he can try and figure out how he's going to get this to work. But that's when we really start, other than the fact that Jeffrey is this bit of a mad scientist, we get like almost not a 1-for-1, but we get this real similar homage to Frankenstein, where we get half the name of the movie, with him setting up the body and getting it all stitched back together, putting it up on a big platform during a storm. He knew the storm was coming, so he was planning this whole resurrection during
couple days ahead.
He has the head, so he's got that, but he's got this whole resurrection plan figured out for this specific night.
I do want to point out, I love that he drives back to New Jersey with a open trunk full of body parts that he's just dragging through like the most populated city in the country.
Well, hey, at this time,
he never gets pulled over. Never gets.
In the 90s, he probably could drive through New York and wouldn't have gotten second looks most of the time. But the resurrection occurs.
Maybe. Mm-hmm.
And Elizabeth comes back and not quite what he expected.
Yeah, so Elizabeth comes back, and I don't think they intended Patty Mullen to look like, I'm not even sure Patty Mullen plays Elizabeth before the lawnmower accident. It almost looks like a different actress. That's how different these two women look in the face. And I've never done the research to find out or care enough if it's the same person before and after. But essentially at this point, what I do like is that Elizabeth is superpowered in a little bit. Like, so she wakes up, basically starts like rambling off one-liner hooker phrases. And when she doesn't get the answer that she wants, she essentially like bitch slaps people out of her way and like throws them across rooms or whatever, and just goes off stomping into the night to find her next fix. Additionally, if you are lucky or unlucky enough, I guess, depending on how you look at it, to have some kind of, I don't know what the catalyst with this is, but if she kisses you or if she gets like intimate with you, I guess, you also blow up for some reason.
As if you had ingested some super crack of your own.
Yeah. Again, I don't know how, I mean, she bitch slaps several dudes on the way through before the first person she blows up, and there's no explosions there. So I guess it's not as simple as a hand job, but anything involving saliva, I guess, yeah, that's where it's
bodily fluids, I guess.
It's messy. Yeah. That's kind of where this movie takes off. And really the rest of the movie is Jeffrey trying to chase down Elizabeth kind of creating chaos, and then kind of somehow gets her back to his mad scientist lair garage and has a little heart-to-heart with her, which doesn't go very well. As Jeffrey's going through New York, Zorro sees Elizabeth. He sees his tattoo on her arm, and he does have several scenes where he's crying at the bar, saying, "Oh, my bitches are gone. My bitches are blown up," and stuff. And then he sees the one that's all like, he recognizes the tattoo and immediately goes into like, get my bitches back mode.
The thing I like about when Elizabeth gets brought back is that she utters all these phrases and things that the different hookers had been saying. So she takes on, even though the head is the same, her head, her brain, all that stuff. You get all it's so implausible, right? He's just been storing this head with a brain in it for days.
It's like a thing of Kool-Aid. So
she's repeating all these phrases and things. And I think Zorro notices not only the brand or the tattoo on her arm, but also saying the phrases that the other hookers had said before going off with Jeffrey. So that kind of gets Zorro, on the case, and they get back to Jeffrey's kind of lair.
Zorro on the case.
Zorro's on the case, bitches.
Picturing him in like a Sherlock Holmes hat with the Zubas on.
A pipe.
Yeah. Would have been a nice touch. So,
but then the confrontation occurs at his little lair where all the resurrection, the Frankenstein stuff goes on, and he has this freezer full of these body parts that start to kind of meld together thanks to this ooze, and they take over.
It's all the extra body parts from the hookers that he didn't put onto Elizabeth.
Yeah. And they become these creatures that I kind of talked about earlier that look like basket case kind of throwaways, and they defeat Zorro, and I believe they take down Jeffrey as well. So I don't know if we want to spoil the end, but the end has a bit of a twist where Elizabeth then returns the favor onto Jeffrey. But unfortunately, the thing that I didn't ever pick up during the actual movie was that Jeffrey stated that this process that he was doing only worked on women.
Yeah, it only worked on female body parts. So you also never find out how Elizabeth gets the fake medical knowledge to be able to reattach Jeffrey's head to what she attaches it to. And I don't believe there was another storm going on for her to be able to kind of do the whole Frankenstein part with it.
Just goes to show you anybody can do it. Just got to get some body parts together.
We're talking about a movie called Frankenhooker. I don't think it has to be plausible.
Yeah, not expecting realism here.
No, not at all. I don't know. Like, I find this movie to be a good time. It's fun. It is stupid. It's, you know, all the things that you could say negative about it. It's one of those movies that they're also all the things you could say positive about it in a lot of ways. You hear the phrase in movies, it's so bad, it's good. And I don't think that's accurate here, because I think movies can be so bad, they're bad. And I think more often that's the case. But this is one of those movies where its weaknesses and its insanity are almost its strengths at the same time. And it kind of makes for this, I don't know if I would call it, it's unique in that it focuses around a Frankenstein hooker, but it does have a feel of something that seemed like this vibe in this movie, this weird late 80s, early 90s, like super flamboyant neon, like paleted type of movie. It feels like something that you've seen before in that sense. And they're just kind of rotating out different, not necessarily just different characters, but like different themes or different.
Yeah, throwback kind of ideas and yeah.
Right.
No, I agree with you.
I think it's done well in that aspect, but I think that's kind of the vibe that it gives.
Yeah, and I can totally see why there's a cult following to this movie. I mean, it, again, not watching it for, God, 30 some odd years and finally watching, like, no, okay, I understand what all the fuss is about. This was, especially at the time that it came out, there was probably not a whole lot that was really close to this other than maybe the previous works by the director, but I can definitely tell why this was so loved.
It was also at a time where content like weird movies that feature a hooker character, I'm willing to bet if I go on Tubi right now, I could find several movies that involve some kind of horror comedy element and some kind of hooker or porn star or cam girl or thing of that nature.
Oh, you mean
current,
current movies?
I'd say just in general.
Okay.
Like, it just, the way to find them is so much easier now, where like before you
had to troll video stores to find stuff like this,
or troll resale shops, or you had to know what you were looking for. This movie wasn't being advertised on like coming this Friday, Frankenhooker, you know, shit like that.
I feel like I do remember seeing one of those like pre-roll or post-credit trailers or adverts for this movie. I do feel like I saw it a few times.
Maybe, but I mean, are you seeing that at the end of Basket Case, or are you seeing that?
You're probably seeing it in like
after Die Hard
movies.
or something like that.
Well, maybe after Die Hard too. Depending on who the distributor was.
But that's my point. It wasn't like finding it now where, again, this movie's on Tubi all the time. You can stumble on this movie fairly easily with a low point of access, where before you either had to stumble on it and have the luckiest afternoon of your life, or you had to like seek it out knowing specifically what you're looking for and have a much harder time finding. I do think that you probably, I have a feeling that you're probably going to be a little harsher on this when it comes to Hot Dog Time than I will. But it's kind of like when we talked about Sleepaway Camp. Like, I kind of wonder if you would have that, if you had that nostalgia bug for it, like if it would give you a different vibe too.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's the same with everything that we watched. We talked about Undefeatable, you know, and you thought that was a flaming pile of shit. And that's, I think you almost word for word said that. And I loved it because I have great taste. So.
I mean, I might have.
No, I don't think you said that. But hey, if nobody listens to any episode but this one, don't think that's what you said, and that's the truth.
I remember saying that I really enjoyed watching that stuntman almost kill himself jumping off of that parking barrier onto a car.
Yeah, no nostalgia.
Anyway, anything else you want to add before we get cooking?
No, the other thing I want to say, I guess, is if I would have seen this around the time of release, I would have been, 16? No, 13? Yeah, I would have loved this. There's so many boobs. So much nudity, so worth the price of admission for that alone. This would have been a perfect doubleheader to Revenge of the Nerds with my mom watching it and walking away before all the nudity happened, thank God, with all my friends watching it at my house. So would have been a perfect double feature for that.
Never would have thought that to be the double feature pairing, but I can see it. All right, you want to lead us off or you want me to go first?
Yeah, I can start.
Okay.
The big thing I would want to say about this movie is wow. If I could sum it up in one word, wow. What a really weird play on Frankenstein, prostitution, and the crack epidemic. It's like I said before, it's a really weird time capsule of the late 80s, early 90s B-movie filmmaking. The special effects, they're not my favorite. They're very goopy, so I do like it for that respect. They're not my favorite, but I did really enjoy the kind of schmaltzy vibe that you get from just the whole movie. Like I said, it has those feelings of like a early Tim Burton film, a Pee-wee's Big Adventure, just Tim Burton. Like, I don't know how else I could say it. Early Tim Burton, the stuff that was actually pretty good. And I did get a few laughs out of the movie. Some of the things that were said, Robert Downey Jr., the Morton Downey Jr. analog, I thought was pretty funny. The guy smoking with the yellow teeth, the car salesman, the bum with the sandwich boards on that has this interaction with Jeffrey, I thought was all pretty funny. This should have been a movie that I would have rented pre-internet porn, because God knows there are just a ton of nude ladies in this one. And again, if this movie taught me anything, 90s hookers in New York City were pretty good looking. I'd give it 6.5 rubber boobs out of 11 hot dogs.
Okay. So I do have that nostalgia bug for this movie. I found this movie, I don't know, about way too young. I was probably like 14, 15 when I found it. And I've always had a soft spot for it ever since. Still do. It's goofy. It's silly. It's a fun, almost popcorn movie, but not quite, because it's just gross enough that I don't know that I want to have a whole bunch of food in my mouth while I was watching this. The effects are very silly and very obviously fake, but they're also very obviously practical effects in the fun way. They're from that era where it's like, that looks like utter trash in a way, but it looks like glorious trash, because it's almost, you're just as impressed that they went there and they managed to do it. And truthfully, if this movie was done with, well, this movie has plenty of like bad 90s computer effects, but if the things that were done practically were done with like CG, even by today's standards, it just wouldn't be as entertaining. It would take away the goofiness of the movie and replace it with something that just falls short. So it really is a movie that kind of lives in a vacuum and kind of fits the time period that it came out in really well. I hate saying that it's got Tim Burton vibes, because I really don't like Tim Burton, but it kind of does. Except it's a much more like edgier Tim Burton. Like, I don't think Tim Burton ever mentioned crack in any of his movies, and I'm pretty sure he hasn't had super crack at any point either. So, fuck him for that.
And I mean Tim Burton in the best way, by the way, not the latter day lazy Tim Burton. I'm going to follow the same aesthetic for everything.
I get what you're saying. I personally, I don't even like the old Tim Burton stuff, but that's an argument for a different day. But yeah, this movie's fun. If you want to see a whole bunch of boobs, if you want to see something that's crazy, if you have not seen this movie and want to see a movie that will make you say, what the fuck did I just watch this and then pair it with Street Trash. It's way more animated than pairing it with Revenge of the Nerds. Or just watch this. I mean, it's like I said, this movie's been available for free on Tubi for as long as I've been watching Tubi. Like, this seems like it's one that is just always on there, so it's pretty accessible. It's worth checking out. I'd give it probably, I'd say 7 super crack pipes out of 10 hot dogs. It's not perfect by any stretch, but it's memorable, and it's one whenever I go back to it, I don't ever regret putting it on. So,
and thank you Tubi for sponsoring this episode.
They should fucking sponsor our episodes. So, speaking of sponsorship, the not sponsored by Tubi question of the week this week is a pretty straightforward one. We didn't get a whole ton of responses, but the ones we did will be good enough. Question of the week is, who is your favorite movie or real life hooker? So all we're looking for is, who is your favorite hooker, whether it's a fictional hooker or a real life hooker. I don't think anyone gave me a real life hooker, and that disappoints me. So I was really like hoping someone would say, I really like
my mom
on Michigan Avenue. Ooh, that would have been rough. So help me out with this one, because I'm not familiar with this character, and if maybe you are. At Bitchin' Boutique on X, Twitter, whatever it is, they responded, Irma Laduce? Laduce? Do you know that character?
No.
All right, well,
Not
I
at
guess
all.
we can Google it.
Let's Google. Let's fire up the Google machine.
All right, my keyboard's timed out. Irma Laduce. Oh, this is a film. Okay.
Emma or Irma?
Irma. IRMA.
Oh, I knew an Irma.
This is a comedy romance. I've seen this cover before. I didn't know it was about a prostitute.
How do you spell the last name?
Douce. 1963. When a policeman falls in love with a prostitute, he doesn't want to see her with other men, so he creates an alter ego where he will be her only customer. That feels like a rather ahead of its time plotline for a 1963 comedy romance movie.
It's a French film?
Sure.
I don't know.
Anyway, moving right along. At Daniel Hood 4 said, Alabama from True Romance. I have actually never seen True Romance.
What?
It's one of the few Tarantino projects I've not watched.
What? You made me blow my mic out here. What? You have never seen True Romance?
Well, I'm aware of it, but no, I've never watched it.
Man, that's a good one. We might have to do that. Might have to be our one and only Tarantino movie we talk about on the podcast.
He just wrote that, though. He didn't direct that, right?
Correct. I believe that he wrote it, but did not direct. Yes.
Okay. At Doobie Shadow 420 has a gift from Pretty Woman, and I don't remember Julia Roberts' character's name in this, but it's with the whole snapping the necklace box on her, and she makes a really goofy noise.
Does the horse laugh?
That. Yes. I don't remember her character's name, and I don't care. Taproom Tabby, our friends over at the Gray's Taproom podcast, said From Hell, Heather Graham was fantastic. It's been a really long time since I've seen From Hell. I remember Heather Graham being in it, but I don't remember her being a prostitute, but I'll believe her.
That's about Jack the Ripper, right? From Hell, isn't that? Yeah.
Yeah, that's a Tim Burton movie too, isn't it?
That's a Hughes Brothers movie.
Okay. Yeah, I haven't seen that in a really long time either, so I can't be held liable for anything. Horn Sash, What Would You Do, Pod? Said Deuce Bigalow, male gigolo, which I like that someone actually had the gall to bring up a male prostitute. That's a good thing.
He's a man whore.
Yeah.
He can kiss you with his butthole.
Is that in that movie? I haven't seen that in a really long time either.
I believe it is. I believe it is.
Oh, that is good to know. Then, hold on. I just lost it here. I'm going through. This is going to be fun to edit around, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. The whole thing's going to be good.
Yeah, it's going to come down to 15 minutes. So our friend over at Film Spark Pod, Ebony061, she said Elizabeth from the movie that we're talking about. So seems like a no-brainer. And then certainly, last but not least, would be Hissy Face X, which is Pearl over on Twitter, X, whatever it is. Real simple. She said Roxy is her favorite horror from, and she used the word horror from It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia and included several screen captures of her being drugged up in every one of these pictures. Sean, do you have a favorite hooker or in a movie or TV show or real life that you would like to call out on this show?
You had read so many answers by this point. I don't remember who said it, but I got to go with Alabama Whitman from True Romance.
I can't comment on that one, so I'll agree with just say cool. My favorite hooker in film, TV, or otherwise is going to be Gail from Sin City. She was played by Rosario Dawson. I always like the Sin City comic books. I'm a Robert Rodriguez fan, and the scene where they line the top of a couple skyscrapers with a bunch of hookers and gun down a bunch of mob guys is kind of really gratifying in a way. Does that really cool noir thing where you basically see the screen turn red from like the ground up, and it's supposed to be blood, I assume. I don't know. Never watched the second Sin City movie, but that scene was always one of the more, well, that movie was really entertaining, and that scene was one of the more entertaining ones out of it, in my opinion.
You're probably not missing much with Sin City 2. So you made a wise choice.
I bought it. I just never watched it, which is a stupid move on my part. I think that's all we got for this week. Do you have anything you want to tack on here at the end of this that we can edit around or edit out?
I was just going to say, if you want your answer to the question of the week answered on this podcast and have John deftly read it for you, you'll have to follow us on all the social media platforms. We're available at Dewey Pod Monster.
It's true. I am not the strongest reader of tweets for whatever reason. So, or X's, whatever they are now. Yeah, I think that's all we got. So in the meantime, as Sean mentioned, follow us on all the socials. We're at Dewey Pod Monster. We're even on some of the new weird ones. You can follow us on YouTube, where we put live content up once in a while. It's been a while, but we'll get to that eventually. And let's see. Oh, we have a website. It's crap.town. We have new paint on there. It looks really nice. You should check it out. So check out the link in the description of this episode. We'll be sharing it on social media as well, where you can look into the new In Search of Darkness 1990 to 94 version. We had a blast talking with David Weiner about that a few months back. We're both really looking forward to that movie when it comes out. So go support them. We will. And then follow Sean. Sean, where can people find you?
If you're interested in Michigan craft beer, you can find me at youtube.drafttherapy.com. You can also follow me on all the social media networks at Draft Therapy, except for the ones I'm not on. I don't know which ones those are, but if I'm on them, you'll find me at Draft Therapy.
Okay, so that's it. So go do some super crack. We'll be back next week. Hint, hint, there might be a little shapely character named Wayne. What's his last name?
I have no idea what you're even talking about. A shapely character named Wayne.
Well, the shape, Wayne.
Oh.
Wayne's World, Michael Myers. Not Wayne Algar. It's like Garth Algar.
Yeah, Garth Algar. Wayne.
This is the worst thing ever. So
Does he have a last name?
he's got to have a last name. God damn it. Campbell. Wayne Campbell.
Oh, yeah, Wayne Campbell. Right. Swimming.
Hearing the dog in the background.
No, that's just, I like the way you ended that. That's good. Good stuff.
Is that what that is? It's terrible. Why someone else needs to write it.
Damn it, Bobby. When I'm shopping for propane and propane accessories, I'm always jamming out to the Dewey Pod Monster podcast.